You are listening to the IFH Podcast Network. For more amazing filmmaking and screenwriting podcasts, just go to ifhpodcastnetwork.com.
Welcome to the Successful Screenwriter Podcast, where we discuss anything and everything screenwriting. Here we interview successful screenwriters and filmmakers to find out just what it takes to make it in the industry. All right, welcome to the podcast. We have on an amazing guest today, writer and director Travis Milloy. Thanks for being on with us.
Thanks so much. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Yeah, man, this is awesome. You've done some cool work. You did Pandorum, which is like a sci-fi space horror, and I loved it. I thought it was great. Had Ben Foster in it, Dennis Quaid, great cast, really interesting film.
Absolutely.
And then you wrote and directed Infinity Chamber, which is a contained sci-fi thriller, and I thought it was a lot of fun.
Thank you.
And we did a film analysis on it, and then you found out about the film analysis, and we got you on the show, which is awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll tell you that it's interesting because those two movies are complete opposite ends of the spectrum for big budget studio films and the most indie in your garage type no budget movie. So it's at least I think I have a pretty good perspective on both ends of that spectrum. And working in the bigger studio things and the very indie, no-budget movies as well.
I really want to dive into that. I want to dive into your process of writing and directing. Before we get into that, though, with this show, we always like to go into an origin story. So if you can give us just kind of a brief way that you kind of broke out and found success with Pandorum or whatever work you did.
Absolutely. I grew up in Minnesota. I was in the independent film world there in Minneapolis, and working on films and commercials and things like that. I worked for Prince at Paisley Park, and I decided to make my own indie film. This is back in the 90s. So I made this $200,000 action shoot 'em up film. It wasn't a very good movie, but we accomplished what we wanted to accomplish. And I took it to Hollywood and sold it. It actually did pretty well, which got me a pretty big agent at the time. So it was interesting. I wanted to be a director, and he said, I won't represent you as a director, but I'll represent you as a writer. And I was like, well, I'm not a writer. And he says, well, you are now. And I was like, okay. So I kind of got thrown into the Hollywood system, and I've been working as a writer for years in the studio system. It took me a long time to kind of figure out the politics of it, to understand how that machine works. But I was making a living, but nothing was getting produced. It wasn't very satisfying to me to just be in development and writing spec scripts and all that kind of stuff. So I got a little anxious, and I decided to write my own script, just do my own thing, something that no one was going to read. And that was Pandorum. And it was a interesting learning experience because it was a big light bulb moment that suddenly a script worked for the Hollywood machine. And I realized that I was finally writing for myself. I was finally writing something that I believed in. I was finally writing a movie that I wanted to see. I wasn't faking enthusiasm for another story or another project. So Pandorum took off, and actually pretty quickly, as far as industry kind of standards go. So that movie then took off. And then that got me a lot of work as a writer, writing projects, fixing scripts, developing scripts, and then writing my own spec scripts that were getting optioned and purchased.
Right.
So that's kind of how it all started.
It's interesting. I've been there where you've optioned the script and you get that promise it's going to happen, and you get a little bit of cash, and then nothing happens, and it is maddening because it's almost like you've got the blank canvas, you buy all the paint, you have the design in your mind of what you're going to do, right? You just never put the paint on the canvas, and it's just like, it's not done, but you still sell it, and that's the crazy part. So I could totally understand your frustration there. And I was talking to Greg Hurwitz, and he said he had this piece of advice of write what lights you up. And it sounds like that's exactly what you did. And it's amazing that you did that. You had this inspiration for Pandorum, and then it happened fast, which can happen. Like, good news goes quickly.
It can.
So with Pandorum, where did that come from in your mind creatively? Because I think it's a really cool take on the sci-fi horror.
Thank you. Actually, it's an interesting story. Along with that, that notion of writing my own thing, that nobody, no agents or executives were going to read this script. So I was a little more fearless in my decisions. I wasn't worried about how someone would accept the story or not. So I literally just wrote my own story, and I was planning on doing it independently. I was going to shoot it as a low budget, $200,000. We were going to shoot it in an abandoned paper mill. We actually started pre-production. So I was going to do this very small film with my roommates and all that kind of stuff. And then my agent, he asked what I was working on. I said, well, I did this thing. I'm going to go do this little movie on the side. And then he read it and he goes, whoa, wait a minute. This is actually really good compared to all your other stuff. Oh. And I was like, well, yeah, I appreciate it. And then he started sending it out and he said, listen, I've got some bigger players interested, so stop doing what you're doing. And at that time, I was a little bit jaded, and I was like, "Yeah, well, you keep doing what you're doing. I'm going to go make my little movie." And then, so I just kept going. He was like, "All right, stop. You have to stop what you're doing because the Impact and Constantine are interested, and etc." So anyway, but the story itself, it was interesting. I was working as a ground marshal at an airport when I was in college. And the Con Air plane came in, the plane that delivers convicts. Right. And I started writing a script about that plane being hijacked. And then Con Air came out. So then I was like, oh, okay, well, someone beat me to it. Scratch that. So that sat on the shelf for years and years and years. And then I revisited it. And I thought, well, maybe I could switch it. Maybe I could go sci-fi with it. Yeah. So that's where it started. And the original script, it was a prisoner ship, bringing 50,000 of the world's worst people to a prison on the planet. So that's kind of how it evolved. But the one thing that I think what was interesting about that process was I decided to do something I didn't normally do before, is that I wrote without a structure. Okay. I wrote without an outline. Yeah. I just did the page one, have no idea where it's going to go. Yeah. I wanted to try to give it that spontaneous, organic vibe. So that's why I gave the lead character no memory, so that I was on the same page as he was going down those corridors, and I didn't know what was around each corner. So it was and as you know, it's kind of a dangerous way to write, because you can always paint yourself into a corner. But this one just seemed to work, and I literally didn't know what was gonna happen at the end. I was literally like, there's the scene where they get to the cockpit and they finally look out the windows. We don't know where the ship is. I didn't know what to do. And I stopped and I took the dog for a walk, and I was thinking about outer space and where could they be and all this stuff. And my dog was drinking from a puddle in the street. And I thought, oh, okay, so that's about as opposite as that. Yeah. So I put the ship underwater, and it all worked.
It's a great twist. It's a great twist. Actually,
thanks.
Yeah, well, the thing about that twist made me want to see more. I was like, okay, now what happens to them on the planet? Like, I'm ready for the sequel. You know what I mean? I was like, yeah, that was really cool, because you have these monsters and then the evolutionary gene, and maybe people are still corrupted. So I thought it was really cool that you had created it that way, where I was like, oh, I wonder what happens next. And so I really did. I really did like that. And you're right, it could totally be dangerous to write that way. But obviously you had the story burning in you. It needed to come out. It came out the right way, which is great. Yeah. So Infinity Chamber. Yeah. Where'd that come from?
You know what? That was, so after Pandorum, then I got a lot of work as a writer, but I was still, that itch wasn't getting scratched. I wanted to get back into indie filmmaking, right? And I needed to do something. I just knew how the machine worked. I'd seen enough projects go down that path of trying to attach talent, trying to attach, putting all those players together for a package. And I saw how frustrating that was. So I decided, you know what, I'm going to try to write the most self-contained, easiest production that I can. So that was the motivation. And I put these restrictions on myself. I said, 1 actor, 1 room. Okay, go. And I just dug into that. So that was, and I was very motivated. And as you probably know, it's really easy to procrastinate in filmmaking.
You say that,
especially making an indie film. It's like, next year, when the kids are out of school, when we have more money, when we have more this, when we have more that. Well, I knew that so well, so I decided to force my hand. And I rented an industrial space in San Fernando Valley, and I started building the set.
Okay.
And I figured that after several months, after I've spent all this time and energy and money, there's no going back. I'd be a fool not to make the movie. So without a script, without a cast, without a crew or any kind of money, I just went over and I started building the set. And it took me a year working on the weekends to actually put the set together. But by the end of that year, it was kind of like stone soup, because then my friends and my peers were all like, "What are you doing?" And they stopped by and like, "Wait, what are you doing?" And I was like, "Well, I'm just building a set, and I'm gonna shoot this movie." And slowly everybody's like, "Well, hey, I got a guy, I got this." And by the end of the year, by the time the set was built, I had the financing and the cast and the crew.
Did you have the script done?
No, I was writing it. So
you're writing it as you're building the set?
Which helped because I was in that space. I was in that mind space.
Yeah,
so when I look back, it's like I spent as much time in that room as the character did in the movie. So I think it kind of worked creatively. But,
that's pretty amazing. I mean, I love the film.
Thank you.
I'm going to jump back on you just for a second. So when you said initially with Pandorum, you had initially written that Con Air script, and then you cannibalized parts of that script and then created Pandorum. I've done that myself. I've written like garbage scripts, and then I said, this is terrible, but this is a cool scene, or this is a great character. And so I think cannibalizing a script for any writers out there is a great idea. You don't just have to hold on to the Holy Grail. You can cut it up, break it apart, and steal from it. So with Infinity Chamber, super low budget, how long did it take you to make this film?
I don't know, actually. When I think back, I know it was very unorthodox. So we shot sections of it. We shot for a while, then we stopped, and then I edited and tried to figure out what I needed. So we did it in sections over, I don't know, a year.
Okay.
A bigger one. We did one big section, then we stopped. A few months later, we shot for another week, and then I saved sections of it till I was done with the edit. The whole part with Fletcher coming in through the vent,
right?
Because I was going to try to get a name in that role, since it was an easy something I could do in one day. So that section was shot a year later. So it was all kind of this piecemeal thing that happened over a year.
So Christy wanted me to ask you, because she loved the film too, and she's also a huge fan of Pandorum. So she wanted me to ask you, was the process delayed over that year-long sequence because of budget? Or were you trying to acquire more budget, or was it just working out the story?
It was just, a couple reasons. One, it was kind of liberating creatively to not be locked into, okay, you have 21 days, get everything you need, and then we're done. Wow. I was like, you know what? Why does it have to be that way? So I was like, I want to shoot for a little while, and then the other thing was that because me and my wife were doing everything, we needed time to prep all that stuff. Okay. Building all the sets, building all the props. We were it. So I couldn't like tell a team, okay, I need this by Thursday. So we had to build all that stuff. So we needed the time, but I think it was a great experience creatively, not being under the gun. Oh, we're 2 days behind. Oh, we only have till 5:00. It was very relaxing. Like, it's okay. I'll just get that we'll do that next week.
That's absolutely amazing. Yeah. So it frees you up creatively. It takes that time crunch pressure off, and then you just kind of sit there and you can just kind of be in the environment and then allow the environment to inform the script, which
absolutely,
that blows my mind. It's a really cool approach. I still can't believe that you and your wife built all that stuff. That just it blows my mind.
The only obviously the problem with that is you need a crew and cast that is willing to do that process as well.
Yeah.
That's, the fact that I had Chris Kelly was monumental. To be able to stop and start. That's, most actors would probably not be interested in that process. But Chris was actually the person. I knew him before we met in an audition for something else. And I sat down and I told him my idea. And I was like, this guy in an automated prison, da da da. And he was like, let's do it. And I was like, okay. And then he was the inspiration that got me started to go start building the set, to start putting those pieces together. And so that was a big thing. And having the right people.
He's so great in the part.
Oh, yeah. I knew I needed somebody that was, because his face was going to be on the screen alone, that I needed somebody that was interesting to watch.
Yeah. And I just think he's carried it. Yeah. I mean, it's sat on his shoulders. Absolutely. That's just fantastic. So with your process, you had this kind of creativity. Had you been planning on having it kind of loop into itself narratively, where he's staring at the pictures on the wall, he sees all of these different framed photos of places he's visited, and then he visits the places in the film, and we start to learn, okay, is he getting out? Is he not getting out? I mean, that is such a difficult narrative to weave, and I've watched people fail at it. It's just really cool to see how you're able to kind of come up with that.
It's interesting. The one thing I think about that movie, I think I credit it to the process that we did, because originally going in, I don't think I really even knew the theme of the story while making the movie. I started with a very ABC. It was an escape movie. It was a prison escape movie. That's about as deep as we're going to go. And I knew that there would be something more in there. I just didn't know what it was. And I think that's interesting for filmmakers. You don't necessarily need to know your theme when going in, because I think it's a creative journey. Okay. While we were making the movie, those things started to kind of pop up. And then the movie started to change. It was actually literally once Chris started having conversations with Howard, I was like, there's something interesting here. There's something interesting about being detached from not having human contact. And the only relationship you have is artificial, which I think we live in a world now where all of our communication is filtered through electronics, whether it's texting or emailing or all that kind of stuff. So I was like, so what happens to the human condition when you're cut off like that? And so those things kind of grew while we were making the movie. And the fact that he has really two artificial relationships. Yeah. One with Gabby, who is a figment of his imagination created by the system, and Howard. And it's really the same relationship, but there's a different agenda between them. So it's those things kind of came to the surface while we're making the movie.
I mean, just listening to you talk about it is awesome. I mean, because really what you've done in your process, from my interpretation, is you brought the art, right? Because screenwriting, filmmaking, there is a structure to it. It can almost be like baking a cake. You have the recipe, push it in for 21 days, and there you go, right? And then you can add some icing and special effects on top and make it pretty. So there is a lot of that there. Like, structure is a thing, but it sounds like you wanted to take a step back and just kind of let that art flow through the script and discover the story as the story's happening, which is, one, exceptionally brave to be able to do that.
Or foolish.
There's a certain there's a level of hubris there.
Right.
But then be able to do it and be able to accomplish it and to discover the humanity through the filmmaking process is awesome. I mean, it's brilliant because it came through. I could tell, like, you found the humanity, you found the theme, and then you leaned on the theme, and it showed out throughout the script. And I thought, if you didn't find that humanity, if you weren't able to capture that, of course the film would have suffered from it. But you were able to nail it. Yeah.
Thank you. Absolutely. A couple other things that I discovered along the way was originally the Gabby character, the barista in the coffee shop.
Yeah.
Was revealed as a villain. I'd written it where she confesses that that's the whole reason she's here, to get that piece of information from him. There was this big moment, but while we were filming it, I had a change of heart about that. I was like, he's been through enough, and I think it's more interesting telling a story about these very unusual relationships than just having this villain twist. So I was like, I'm going to leave the villain very abstract. It's the ISN, it's them, it's someone that's not really in the story. And I thought that was more interesting. So that was a change while we were filming. It
was 100% the right call, because he needed a grounding character, and that's who Gabby was, because he didn't have one. Howard is not a grounding character. Howard very much usurps the lead there. So I think keeping Gabby that way and having her be almost a romantic interest that he knows is a figment, which is awesome, was perfect. And I love that you kept it that way. It's a really good call. You avoided danger there.
Right. You know what? And another thing was, I didn't think Howard had as much value as then I kind of found. Talking to a computer voice is, we've seen it a million times. It's been done so well, different ways and different films
and everything.
Hal is the Marlon Brando of computer characters. So I knew, like, this is nothing new. We've seen this before, and I didn't think it would be that interesting. So, but as we were shooting, I just found it interesting. I just found it ironic and funny and whatever. But the interesting thing was, we didn't have Howard's voice while we were filming.
Okay.
So I didn't know how that was going to play, how well that was going to work, and I knew it was important. So when we were done filming, I looked for all these different voice actors. I listened to all these different, trying to find Howard's voice, and I couldn't find it. And Jesse, who does the voice of Howard, he was an actor who was a friend of Chris, who was just providing Howard's voice off camera.
Oh.
Giving him something to react to.
Yeah.
So I was editing Jesse's voice for so long, and I couldn't. And I was like, it was ironic, because I was like, this whole time I'm looking for Howard. And
he's right there.
He's right here. Because I was like, there was something interesting about the way they played off of each other. So I used Jesse's voice.
I mean, that's what a great performer does, though, right? A great performer takes that role and won't let you give it to anybody else. And sounds like exactly what he did.
Yeah, and he was so cool. Yeah, he was so. I was like, would you be the voice? And he was like, yeah, sure. Yeah. He was so casual.
It's no big deal, of course.
Yeah, sure.
So I like that you eliminated a twist that didn't need to be there, because I think a lot of filmmakers and screenwriters hear the old adage, what's the twist? What's the twist? Give me the twist. And so they'll work in a twist that's totally unnecessary and can destroy the film. It's good to surprise the audience. It's good to keep them on their toes, because we want to keep them glued to the screen. But if you start adding in twists because you just think it's a great idea, but it doesn't add any value to the story or create any development for the character, you're going astray.
Absolutely. If it's not satisfying, there's a balance to it, but definitely it's interesting. And I think that as a writer, and I'm sure you know this as well, it seems the more you write, the less you rely on the gimmicks. At first, it's very gimmick heavy, like, I have this great shocker, and then I build the script around that, But then as you write more and you learn more, it's like, it's really not, it's that story that's the most important. And if a gimmick works and it serves that story, then great. But there's too much time, too much energy spent on the gimmick. I think
agree.
in screenwriting.
I really agree with you, because for me, the thing that drives me crazy is when somebody wakes up from a bad dream after like 30 seconds, like a big killer intro, you know, you're like, oh, this is cool. And the guy wakes up, or a lady wakes up and he's covered in sweat, and you're going like, oh my God, what's happening? Why are we doing this? You know what I mean? Like, you can't do that.
You know what? I don't know anybody in real life that sits up and goes, yeah, no. Never.
We totally
just slowly like, what the
what's happening?
Was that? Yeah.
So you really beat the hell out of this guy. I mean, this central character, like, you come for him, and I remember I was watching it going, because in the structure that I preach, at the midpoint is when the character is at their lowest, and then they start to rebuild, and then they have another moment right in Act 3 where they're at their lowest again, and then they succeed. So, and I was like, well, we definitely got to be at the midpoint now. We just beat the hell out of this guy. And I look at it as like, we're only like 35 minutes in. I'm like, oh my God, this guy's gone through it. So, but I thought that's great because it keeps you invested in the character. I think it keeps the pressure going, because this is a contained film. We have like two sets, really, if you look at it. We have the coffee shop, and we have the prison. So I'm like, I sat down to watch this knowing this, going, okay, is this going to be boring? Because a lot of situations you'll find like this, films that are done like this, I've seen on like the indie film circuit, it's just dialogue heavy and boring. Right. But as soon as we start to kind of lose a little bit of that steam, there's a power shortage, or he tries to escape. So you keep that kind of that tension going and upping those stakes a little bit. I thought that was like, yes, this is how you do a contained film.
I appreciate that, because that was my biggest fear. That, in going into it, is how are we not going to get bored, and how to keep that story going, because your feet go to sleep after a certain point. So that was my challenge, was how to keep that going. So the one thing for me was, to me, it's a self-contained movie in disguise. That, yes, so much, but to let the movie breathe and to get out of it. And that's why I put in the memory recall, the going to the coffee shop over and over and over, and then he can start to manipulate that, etc. That was like, okay, that's my way out of the story. So we're not in this room the entire time. And plus, it was a budgetary decision, because I could shoot so much in one setup. Right. I was using his wake up routine and him going to the coffee shop over and over and over. So I didn't have a lot of different locations. I could use that Groundhog Day element to get more bang for my buck while shooting. But that was my biggest concern, was the claustrophobic element of it and boredom. And I was really concerned about that. And I got to tell you, just a quick story is that when I edited the film, the first edit didn't work.
Okay.
I went by the script. The script was a little bit differently. And I edited the film, and then I was like, it just doesn't work. It's boring. It's too slow. We got to get to this. How do we do this? So then I changed the story structure in the edit.
Okay.
And then I did a second edit, and then I over edited.
Oh, no.
And I was, which happens because you're like, just get to it. Just get, yeah. My fear, my own insecurities were, so then that second edit didn't work. So then I took a breather, I sat back, and then I took from both of those, like, all right, and I did a third edit, and that's the one that we have now. So, like, when I look at it, I still have problems.
Of course.
With the story.
Of course, because you were involved in it, yeah.
Yeah, the very first scene in the cell is the longest scene in the movie. And that drove me crazy. Like, that's not the time to be stopping and taking our time. And I just wanted to get things going quicker, but you need patience, you need to have restraint, but you need to keep the story moving. So that was a difficult juggling act for me.
I think what works with the first act, if I may.
Please.
Okay.
Please.
What works with the first act is you build the intrigue, right? So what I find with sci-fi films particularly is sci-fi films will grab you early with the world, okay?
Right.
And then if they work well, they're structured well, they keep you with the humanity, right? So with like really bad sci-fi, you start to lose the audience in Act 2, because then it just becomes spectacle. Look how great this world is. That's one of the reasons why AI didn't work so well. But with this, I have the intrigue. Okay, he's in the prison. That's crazy. There's this weird robot, but maybe it's not a robot, because we see a scene of a control station where there might be somebody controlling Howard. So maybe it is a guy. So then you build in the intrigue. So we go start going, oh, okay, this is interesting. And then that keeps you. And then we get into the humanity in Act 2. And then the movie just gets better and better. So I think that really works.
I appreciate it. It's funny. I got a lot of fans that challenged me on that shot of the control room and hearing Howard's voice unfiltered.
Yeah.
So it was interesting. That's exactly why I did it, to try to keep that. Wait a minute, is this a real guy or is it not?
So you have fans that what are they challenging you on?
That was a cheap shot.
Oh, is that what they say?
Yeah.
Oh, it's filmmaking.
Yeah. They're like, well, which is fine. I love the challenge, but it's like that's not fair. You can't do that. And they're like, well, what did you mean by that? And because we heard fingers on a keyboard, and we heard Howard, and I said, well, here's my thought on it: that there was a guy who was sitting there, but that he doesn't provide Howard's voice. That's a program. You were hearing it unfiltered in the control room. There was a guy working until the base was evacuated. And they're like, oh, okay. That's still a cheap shot.
It's not a cheap. I love that you have fans invested enough that they get emotionally upset about it, because that's how much they like the film. And I think that if a fan can come up to you and have that kind of an argument, they've invested in it. That's a good thing. If somebody doesn't like a property, they don't like a film, then their response is apathy.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I love it. I've gotten into the biggest one is the ending. And I've gone on.
I love the ending.
Oh yeah. No, it did exactly what I wanted it to do.
Yeah.
It created a discussion. It created questions. It gave answers. It let people decipher for themselves what that ending would be. And I really wanted to do that. I wanted to give, and long story short, and it's funny because like some of my friends and family, we completely like different things. Different kinds of movies, happy endings, a darker stuff, whatever. And I remember I had a movie experience where I went with friends and family, and everyone had a different reaction to the movie. And I thought,
of course,
God, is there a way to make everybody happy here in a way that we can both enjoy it? Because I have a version of the ending of Infinity Chamber. My wife has a version. Everyone has a different take on what that ending meant. And I was trying to do that, but I thought it was, am I going to get blasted for that?
It's so high risk, dude. It's again, hubris comes into play here. Like it was, I watched that and go, he did it right, but it could have gone south so fast. Like, oh man, yeah, because I've seen it. I've seen the film where they do that, and they have the unknown ending, right?
Yes.
But it's mostly because the filmmaker couldn't commit. Right. Or they're just trying to be overly artistic and that doesn't sell either. Right. But you had a goal for it. It was, how do I make an ending that the answer is yes. And that's what you did. I thought, so awesome. So you've been doing this for a while, and what kind of, We've already talked about, but what kind of advice do you have for indie writers out there, indie filmmakers out there that have seen your stuff or are motivated to get out there and really like try and make this thing happen?
Yeah. I think right now it's such an exciting time to be a filmmaker. I don't think there's ever been another time like it.
Okay.
I really don't, because the technology and the software is accessible to anyone. I mean, you can make a movie with your phone. You can make a movie with everything you can fit into a backpack. And I don't think we've been there before. It's easy technically to make a movie. It's difficult with all the other logistics and creatively. So my biggest advice is to make a movie. And maybe you have $10 or you have $1,000. Regardless, you're making something. And every time you make another one, it's going to improve and you're going to learn along the way. So
Right.
that whole hesitation of, I need a star, I need a budget, I need this, I need this, I need this. Well, sure, but 99.9% of the time, you're going to be waiting forever to have those moons align. So to me, and then also just creatively, my biggest advice is you can't chase trends.
Yeah, I totally agree with that.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest mistake. Most of the time is people are trying to write what's popular, and we know that 2 years from now, it's all going to be different. And by the time your project actually makes it through the machine, that's going to be gone. So, or recycled, or you got to wait for the next cycle and stuff like that. So that's my biggest thing is don't worry about trends at all. Doesn't matter if Westerns or vampires or whatever's popular at the moment. Write what's in your heart. Write what you believe in. Write the movie you want to see. That's the biggest thing.
You know, it's interesting because I equate it to having kids. I know. Just follow me for a second. All right. Sure. I know I'm going off here. So, you know, you're never ready to have a kid, and you say, "Well, I want to wait till I have the house. Oh, I want to wait till we have enough money. Oh, I want to wait till the house is done. I want to wait." You know, you just keep putting it off, and really, it's just a fear thing. And eventually, you just have to tell yourself, you are never ready to have a kid. It's going to be pure chaos and the worst, best thing of your life.
Yes.
And so then you just have to do it. And I think this is the same thing personally.
Absolutely. That's a great analogy. That's about the best analogy I've heard. It really is.
Best thing.
Yeah. Because there's no good time. There's no good time to have a kid or make a movie. That's why you just got to go into it.
You just have to. Yeah, you just have to do it. And with what do we have coming out right now? Do you have anything coming up? You working on stuff?
Yeah. I kind of have my two worlds. I work as a writer for other companies and studios and whatever. So I have a handful of projects that are all in that pre-production phase that will hopefully happen. And then I'm also working on my next indie little passion project out of the garage type movie.
So like another indie, you going with another indie kind of production?
Yeah, absolutely.
Letting the art fill you.
Absolutely. And actually, I'm even taking that a step further, of shooting along the way, of going out and shooting for 2-3 days and then editing and looking at it and thinking about it. And then, okay, we're going to go shoot it again. I'm just going to continue that process. But, when you're not spending money, there's no, there's no danger in that really, other than people's time and energy. But the people that I work with are so passionate about it and so motivated to absolutely, like, I'll call you at 2 a.m. You want to go shoot? Yeah, let's go do it.
It's amazing. So you really have a great network around you. On top of the fact that you have a pretty awesome wife who's willing to go out and build a set with you for like a year straight, that you got to give props. Wow.
Yeah.
So on top of that, it sounds like you're going out, you're filmmaking, and you're creating this network on top of it. And so what's the worst that can come from that? If you're going out and you're putting the effort out there, and then you're just having fun with it, dude. And like,
oh man, yeah, it's a ball. I'll tell you that's my thing. And in fact, cool. I'm doing test shots right now for the next movie, but being in the middle of the night and going downtown LA and driving around by myself, getting the plate shots, getting the B-roll, doing all this stuff. That's, 3 a.m. downtown LA by myself with a camera. I absolutely love it.
So were you getting cool stuff during COVID then when the streets were empty?
Yes.
Were you?
Yeah, absolutely. That was, I did go out and shoot quite a bit because I thought, well, if I need some empty city street apocalyptic, post-apocalyptic, yeah, for sure. But of course now it's so easy to do that kind of stuff in post, but
of course,
regardless. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, Travis, I got to tell you, thanks so much for coming on the show.
Oh, absolutely.
I appreciate your time, and can't wait to find out what your next project is.
Thank you. And thanks so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe and share in your social media where you can tag us at The Successful Screenwriter.